I don't use the term soft skills. I use the term non-technical skills because soft suggests it's easy, and I don't think it is. In fact, I think it's far harder than the technical skills to master. And it also undervalues them. They are a skill and they can be learned.
Hello and welcome to E-FWD, a momentum moment with Fides Oak. I'm Aberdeen Features Lead for Energy Voice, Ryan Duff, and joining me is Paula Paterson, Founder and Solutions Director for Fides Oak. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really, really well today, and thank you for having me here.
So, Paula, you've got a couple of workshops on the horizon. I'm sure that the cold weather is something you're bracing for, but what you're preparing for is this workshop, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So we've actually done a few workshops in recognition really of how difficult the climate is for everyone and how difficult it is to make a commitment to a full programme. So we've designed these workshops because we believe that even if we can offer a little bit of support, a little bit of help, it's better than nothing at all. So these workshops cover what we think are probably some of the key things to consider, particularly within the high hazard industries, but also outside of the high hazard industries as well. So what we've looked at is safety, and we focused on safety generally and behavioural safety, but we're also looking at the prevention of major incidents and the appreciation of major accident hazards, understanding what they are, and barrier management. We're also focusing on leadership, because we think at the moment it's vital within organisations that they have very strong leadership to support people through a very challenging and uncertain period. So again, we're focusing on the non-technical skills of leadership. So we're looking at things like emotional intelligence, accountability, these kinds of things. So employees can be supported through challenging times, but actually gets a better performance anyway, and that's well written about. And we're also looking at coaching skills for leaders, because I think when we look at our leadership in most industries, they're promoted because they're technically very, very good at what they do, or they've been there for quite a long time, and they don't get their leadership skills until sometime after they've experienced the promotion. And again, there's lots of literature out there that talks about the importance of non-technical skills in leadership and in getting the best performance out of people, because a leader's role is really to create an environment where people can do their best. So that's what we're looking at with some of these workshops that we're doing. We also have one that very specifically looks at psychological safety, and with that comes trust. Psychological safety is really important in an organisation. If you want people to speak up, if you want them to tell you the things that are difficult to hear, if you want some new ideas, and God, we need innovation right now, that's where it comes from. It comes from an environment where people feel safe to be able to speak up, and they're probably full of ideas.
On that uncertainty point, the offshore wind rollout isn't happening quick enough to counteract the sort of downturn in oil and gas that the UK is experiencing. That obviously creates job uncertainty and job losses, as we've seen in the headlines. The scale of job creation per sort of revenue generated in offshore wind isn't matching that of oil and gas. And we have operators saying we're going to be out of the UK by the end of the decade, and next decade. Employers are laying out plans to say you're not going to be with us till retirement. It's a big, it's a big thing to, loom over your head. So when it comes to that uncertainty, firms that have chosen to leave, there's no changing that. But how do you address that within the workforce to sort of still protect them, I guess?
Well, I think, again, if we kind of unpick some of this, because there's some real geopolitical stuff going on as well. It's global. It's bigger than we can influence some of this as well. But I think so one of the things that I hear spoken about a lot, because I do some work with wind and work in that environment, I do some work in oil and gas. I've also worked in mining and, other high hazard sectors. They are fishing in the same pool of talent currently, and there is limited talent out there. So I think as oil and gas operators leave, there really is an opportunity to capitalise on that talent and transfer those skills into a different place. So there is that opportunity there. So I don't think it's completely doom and gloom if we can utilise that properly. So there is that opportunity there. But I also think as well that we need to retain the skill that we have, because the expertise is in there. We don't want to lose that skill. And I was working with a client recently who's in, it manufactures trucks. And something that we're talking to some of their staff, they've been there 20, 30, 40 years. And I think that's fairly true of the oil and gas industry as well. In fact, a lot of the high hazard industries. And if we lose that, we're losing an awful lot of expertise and an awful lot of knowledge. And I think we are having some challenges as well, getting younger generations coming into the industry. But it's getting that new talent coming in to all of these industries and making it attractive for them. And what's going to make it attractive for them? They want to see what their career paths look like. They want to know that they're being invested in. They want to know that their values align with an organisation's values. And all of this comes through the organisation's commitment to their development, which is where we come in. But also as well, it's seeing if their personal values align with an organisation's values. And this is about then values-led leadership, being the leaders that they want to see. So I think there's a lot to do, and I don't think it is doom and gloom. I think it just feels very uncertain at the moment.
So, off the back of that, you know, we touched on there the idea that the next generation of workers maybe aren't looking into sort of the high hazard engineering focused spaces. You know, ECITB have got data on that themselves. What type of leaders are the next generation of workers looking to, and what are the values that they need to see in a business?
They're looking for values-led leaders rather than managers. So leaders that can inspire and motivate them rather than hand out tasks and schedules. Because I think we have a generation coming up that very much want to be autonomous. They want to make decisions about their own employment and what they do on a day-to-day basis and how they go about doing that. So I think they want to see values-led leaders. It's interesting because as human beings, we all have humanity. So we all have humanity. So I don't think our values range hugely in terms of that, the things that are really important to us. But I don't know that we always express them. And I don't know that we always express them in the workplace. And I don't know why. I don't know if high hazard drives that. But I think we have a generation of people who want those values to be visible. They want them to be spoken about. They want to see it in their leaders' behaviours and how they turn up every day. They definitely want to see them walk the talk. They want to see the integrity of that as well. And I think they want leaders that care, and demonstrate that they genuinely care about them as individuals. And I don't think any of that is difficult. I don't think any of that is a big ask. And I think that's where performance comes from. And I think that's where trust exists. It's very difficult to trust somebody that you don't know very well. And it starts with expressing your values, either verbally, these are the things that are important to me and why, or expressing them through how you turn up every day in your behaviours.
I want to cycle back to the sort of skills that people in sort of management positions are demonstrating at the moment. I think that ties very well into what you were just saying there. But there was a study done in the US a couple of years ago that kind of pointed to this idea of people being promoted based on being good at the job they are in currently, rather than showing the skills that are needed for the next job up. People kind of get promoted until eventually they're maybe not, they've got to a point that they're not good enough to go the next step up based on how well they're performing in their current job.
And I like the phrase that you used, so I dare you to say it.
I did. I said that it concluded essentially that people are being promoted into incompetency, is what I said, which that kind of skill set that you're talking about, those industry often calls them soft skills, which I'm sure we can have a debate about that as well. But when it comes to these skills, how should firms be looking to to the person that they're going to promote and say, well, actually, you are really good at understanding the people that you work with and managing them personally as well as on a spreadsheet.
That's really interesting. So first of all, I don't use the term soft skills. I use the term non-technical skills because soft suggests it's easy, and I don't think it is. In fact, I think it's far harder than the technical skills to master. And it also undervalues them. They are a skill and it can be learned. So that's the other thing as well. We have a debate often about whether leaders are born or made. And we do an activity in one of our workshops where we dispel that myth, because leaders can actually be made. You just need to learn what leadership needs. And then you need to practice it and get really good at it, just like any other skill. But I don't think that's recognised and rewarded in the same way as the technical skills, so the same effort isn't always put into that.
I was asking, how do organisations identify those skills? Because they're maybe not demonstrated, right? It's sort of like lower levels in the organisation where you don't have management over other people. How do you show, I can do this?
So, again, interesting question. I don't know that many organisations are great with talent management and succession planning, which is really where that would come from. You would identify a person who would fulfil a role, and you train them into that role, you educate them into that role before they even take it. There are methodologies that you can use to identify whether people could fulfill a role or not, although I would use those with some care. You can do things like personality profiling, but I wouldn't say that that was necessarily the make or break. That's not your decision maker, yes or no. It just offers some guidance into the qualities and traits that that person might have and whether they lend themselves well to leadership. But you need to spend time with people, you know. Leaders need to spend time out. I'll call it the shop floor, but I mean outside, in amongst people. We need to spend more time with people outside, get to know them, get to know what their skills and capabilities are. Encourage them in a direction, if that's the direction they're keen on, they're showing an interest in, but also if they have some qualities there as well. And that's going to take some coaching skills on a leader's part, and I'm not sure that all leaders exhibit those skills. And these are good noticing skills. This is getting to know people and know who they are. But also coaching them into these roles and being a good role model.
For the people that are planning on attending,
yes,
what are the takeaways? What can they expect to take out of this? We mentioned uncertain times in industry. It's also a busy time in industry.
It is.
For a lot of people,
it's a huge commitment.
It's saying I'm going to take a few hours out of my day, a day out, an entire day out to go to an event. It's sometimes quite a difficult thing to
some
justify.
of them are 2 and 3 days, some of these workshops as well.
So how do you, what are they getting out of it?
What are they getting out of it? Well, first of all, I think to allow a person to come to a workshop, particularly for 1, 2, 3 days, it is a commitment, but it's also recognition and reward. It's recognising and valuing that person and saying that they're important enough to carve that time out for. And also there's a cost involved. You know what I mean? So I think that goes a long way and that shouldn't be undervalued. When we look at the coaching skills workshops, they do leave with the skills that a coach would use, and they can use those skills as a leader. And to be honest, it should be part of any leader's toolkit. They should be able to use those skills. They should have access to those skills. If they want to get performance, there's reward in it for them. It's a time investment when you leave the workshop to actually put these things into practice. But it's time that will pay you back because you'll get a workforce that's more autonomous. It can make decisions without you being there. It performs better. It's offering up ideas. It's giving you their discretionary effort. When we're looking at safety, we're very much looking at the behavioural side of safety. And incidents are still happening. We are still getting releases on a regular basis in the oil and gas industry and in other industries as well. And there's a cost involved in that. There's downtime involved in that. Other things, if the HSE gets involved, you can end up with prohibition notices and things like this. It saves you those. So if you can get high performance from a team, safety becomes an output. What we focus on are the things that people need to kind of watch out for from a human perspective, from a behavioural perspective. We also look at things like barrier management within high hazard industries, but it's the human aspect of it, where a lot of them maybe focus on the technical aspects of it. As an output then you'll get safety, but what you also get is quality. So if you're in manufacturing, it reduces reworks, or it reduces passing on errors to a client. So that actually then becomes a cost saving. You also get efficiency and you get effectiveness. So the whole production becomes much, much smoother. In the oil and gas industry, they call it silent running. And silent running is what you're looking for. So it does affect the bottom line in the long term. So yes, you attend the workshop, you leave motivated, you leave inspired to try something different. You leave with new thinking and new skills to try. But there is a benefit to doing this. And I think when we look at things like personal development, organisational development as a cost, we're looking at it the wrong way. I think we should be looking at it as an investment, and we need to look at it as value adding for all of those reasons that I spoke about, because it will hit the bottom line. It can also reduce staff turnover. You know, and we know the cost of staff turnover. We know the cost of absences when people aren't happy at work. Oh, there's so many savings.
I've definitely seen figures in the past about the sort of cost of staff turnover versus paying someone a little bit more to retain them often saves the business money. We've used a couple of sort of buzzwords, maybe diminishing it a little bit, but you know, you've mentioned managers, you've mentioned coaches.
Yes.
Let's spell it out in black and white.
Yep.
What's the difference?
A manager, well, actually, what's the difference between a manager and a leader first? So a manager, Edgar Sheen, he was a writer, he wrote about culture, said that leaders create cultures, managers and administrators operate within them. So we're creating leaders. We're creating people who can create a culture. You know what I mean? They are the most influential people within an organisation, purely by title alone. But what we want them to do is to be influential in the right way because of who they are, not what they are. And that's the difference. So leaders motivate, they inspire, they create environments that allow people to demonstrate the best of themselves. Because we recruit people for a skill. We recruit them because they're good at what they do. In fact, they're the best at that time. That's the whole recruitment process. And then we put them in an environment where they're not able to express that. You know, we want to create the environment where they can, and this is through leadership. Managers, according to Edgar Sheen, then they manage tasks, they manage schedules, they manage people's days off. So it's a different experience. Coaching is within the leader's toolkit. So coaching is a subset of leadership. So I'm a coach, you know, as a profession, you can be a coach as a profession. As a leader, it's using some of those skills to get the best out of people. So instead of telling people what to do, remember we've recruited them for what they're good at, we nurture them, we encourage them, we ask them the right questions. You know, how could we do this differently? What might happen if we tried something else? And we give then the workforce the opportunity to express themselves. As a manager, as a leader, I once spoke to a manager who's in a very, very senior position, and he regularly got phone calls at 2 o'clock in the morning because his workforce, if they were having some challenges, were unable to work through the challenges by themselves, so they called him. And it's something called learned helplessness. He told them what to do so many times. They were expecting to be told what to do all the time. So when they needed him and he wasn't there, he'd get these phone calls. Invest in people, give them your time, coach them, nurture them, mentor them, and those phone calls at 2 o'clock in the morning will stop because they'll feel courageous in their own decision making. They'll understand their own decision making because you've coached them through that and given them the confidence to make decisions in these moments. And it's exhausting. It's exhausting as a leader. And I'm using the term leader very broadly because I'm talking about anyone that's got responsibility for people who are influential. That's an exhausting place to occupy when you have to tell people what to do all the time.
Well, Paula, this was a really interesting conversation. Thank you very much for coming into our studio here in Aberdeen. Those workshops sound very interesting, and I look forward to hearing what the outcomes of them are. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for watching. If you'd like to stay up to date with everything that's happening with E-FWD's members, stay tuned right here.